Our next speaker will be Mr. Erik Lindberg, and he's an impacted Westchester resident. He lives 400 feet from the pipeline, and his child attends local elementary school, also 400 feet from the pipeline. Erik?
Thank you very much. Hello. I've been asked to give some local perspective on what it's like living in the area and what it means to be an impacted resident. As was said, I live about 500 feet from the existing pipeline, the old route, and my daughter's elementary, which I think some of you toured today, that area, is only 400 feet from the brand new segment that's been cut through for plank. When we moved here a few years ago, we didn't even know the pipeline was there, where you don't directly abut the property, and we are just at the edge of what the industry calls the potential impact radius. That's the official calculated distance from a pipeline where a rupture could affect people or property. Essentially a blast radius. That is a very conservative mathematical estimate that they use to determine what is a high consequence area, which is another way of saying a sacrifice zone. There was no pipeline near the school at all at that time. But now, as of this fall, our home, our school, and hundreds of other homes, public spaces, and businesses that were previously thought to be outside of the danger zone are now within that new sacrifice area, which is calculated at about 845 feet, given the pressure of the pipeline. In previous incidents, ruptures around the country, those estimates have turned out to be extremely small. Just this past year in Pennsylvania, there was an eruption in a rural area which incinerated a home and rendered several others uninhabitable about a half mile away because it melted the vinyl right off the outside of the buildings. That was also a Spectra pipeline that has a history of problems. So the point is that even if the risk is low, the consequences are astronomical. And those consequences, the risk of those consequences will be with us for 40 to 50 to 60 years that the pipeline is planned to be in operation. These are long-term investments in fossil fuel infrastructure that do not get us any closer to any of our long-term climate goals and directly impact the people who live around them. So yes, we're what you'd call impacted residents. Now, to live in this area, it sounds kind of bleak. In the event of a rupture, we know from other reports and from official explanations, no help is coming for us. First responders are routinely instructed to simply stay clear of an area, let the gas burn out, however long that takes, whether it's 5 miles worth of gas, 10 miles worth of gas, it could be hours before that fire is put out. First responders are instructed simply to stay out and go look for survivors after the fact. Local authorities are given little to no training or guidance. Often that training and guidance is counterproductive or unclear, and many of them simply go by the terms. We're not going in until the fire is out and we get the all clear, which, given the severity of these explosions, that is probably what they have to do. But the problem that many first responders face is they will not know exactly what is happening when a rupture occurs. It's been described as the sound of a freight train or a high-pitched generator, the sound of venting gas. When that occurs, if someone has identified that it is in fact a gas leak, they are instructed to shelter in place, seek cover, evacuate if you can, but if you can hear it, you're too close. And do not use electronics or car engines. This runs a little counter to our normal emergency response for fire, which is to evacuate. It certainly makes it impossible to call 911 or 411 or any other informational or emergency number. And if it were an Indian Point evacuation, of course, you would be wanting to get out. So in the highly unlikely but high consequence event that you had a rupture near the plant, you would be simultaneously instructed to shelter in place, do not use a car engine, or get in your car and drive away. This is just an example of like this absurd confluence of infrastructure that is far too dangerous to put together in one place. But one thing I want to talk about that I don't think really gets a lot of serious coverage is that even if the pipeline has no serious failures, even if it works absolutely perfectly for 50 to 60 years, this is still a public health hazard running through a high density residential area. We are asked to accept increased yearly emissions of pollutants from valves, compressor stations, metering stations, and any unknown leakage that may happen over the course of the pipeline's lifetime. It's hundreds of tons per year of volatile organic compounds, including contributors to ground level ozone and known carcinogens, as has been discussed here today. They contribute substantially to higher than average instances of asthma, respiratory cancers, and cardiovascular disease. This part of the Hudson Valley already shows signs of suffering from these effects, and with an estimated, I think, 300% increase in gas capacity, that's going to get worse. So this is a raw deal for anyone living in the area, anywhere from Stony Point all the way up to Connecticut and beyond. And as we said before, if you live within 50 miles of Indian Point, you are an impacted resident because there has been no truly independent risk assessment of the problems. We've been fighting this for about 2 years now. We've gotten all sorts of different information from experts and the agencies and other people who've had personal experience with this. When a Freedom of Information Act request was made for the risk assessment that was submitted to the NRC for the pipeline next to the Indian Point Power Plant, it was a single page of barely legible hand-scrawled notes. Didn't even bother to type it up, and that was what was submitted for the safety review. That is an unacceptable level of negligence, and it does a disservice to the people who actually study these events and how they impact us. New York has banned fracking, but we still face the threat of expanded fracked gas infrastructure in our communities. As I've said, this is an unacceptable risk to all of us, whether it works or whether it fails. And it's time for our elected officials, some of whom who have stepped up and have thankfully made their objections known and have taken a stand on this issue. But we need our most highest elected officials in the state, Governor Cuomo, Senators Gillibrand and Schumer. We need them to step up. Don't pay lip service to the issue. Don't claim to be green when you take no action. Take concrete steps to protect constituents. Use their power to speak up for the safety of everyone in the region. Investigate FERC. Reform the infrastructure approval process. Stop the next 2 segmented expansion projects on this exact same pipeline that will be going through in the next 3 to 5 years. Start looking out for long-term health and environmental interests, and not just the interests of their donors and the energy lobbyists. Thank you.